most striking object lesson of recent history is broken and prostrate Germany, still paying in poverty, misery, and suffering for the war it brought upon the world. Today, Hitler's once arrogant master race is humbled and abject. All its aspirations are reduced to an endless struggle for mere existence, for enough fuel to keep from freezing, for enough food to keep from starving. Thousands of Germans, important or obscure, found guilty by due process of law of actively abetting the Nazi cause, have been punished in degree for their crimes against humanity. For the victorious nations are resolved to crush forever the doctrines which once brought the world so close to utter destruction. These evil doctrines were first laid down by Adolf Hitler in 1925 in his book Mein Kampf, which became the Nazi Bible.
God has made Germans a race of supermen. Almighty God, bless our German blood. Frontiers are made by man and changed by man. Only those who are strong enough to hold their lands are entitled to have them. When we talk of new lands for Germany, we think first of Russia and her border states. Europe is not large enough for two major powers. The might of our deadly enemy, France, must be destroyed. Democracy is a monstrosity born of filth and fire. Germany will be the world power or nothing. Almighty God, bless our battles.
From those early lean years when Adolf Hitler was campaigning for power until the time he became Chancellor and Führer of the German Reich, he constantly promised the crushed and poverty-stricken people of Germany that under his National Socialist Party, Germany would someday wipe out the humiliation of its defeat in the First World War and regain all that was lost by the Treaty of Versailles. But to a nation sick of war, Adolf Hitler pledged time and time again that all this would be fulfilled without bloodshed.
Germany needs.
In 1935, after its Saar Basin, lost in the First World War, had been restored to Germany by plebiscite, Hitler proudly announced that his new Germany, violating post-war treaties, had secretly rearmed. To indignant France and England, he explained that his army and air force were solely for home defense. In less than a year, German soldiers, again breaking a treaty, marched into the demilitarized Rhineland. To startled and uneasy Europe, Hitler said,
"Now the peace."
As Hitler's rule over Germany became absolute, to his alarmed neighbor, in 1938, a Nazi army 150,000 strong rolled into Vienna, and Hitler proclaimed an end to Austria's 800 years as an independent nation. And where Hitler's agents had long been at work, the German minority first demanded self-government, then outright annexation to the Nazi Reich. Czech refusal precipitated the notorious Pact of Munich.
This is the last. I shall not be interested in the Czech state anymore, and I can guarantee it.
Within 6 months, Hitler's war machine swept into Prague, and the free people of Czechoslovakia became enslaved subjects of Nazi Germany. With his eastern neighbor, Poland, shared with the Poles territory seized from Czechoslovakia. And with fine words, Hitler re-emphasized his earlier pledges.
Our agreement with Poland shall adhere to the treaty.
End of September 1939, Poland was in ruins. and its helpless people had been marched off to furnish slave labor for the great new Germany. Again, Germany shared its spoils, this time with a new friend. Almost half of conquered Poland was delivered into the keeping of Soviet Russia, as Hitler loudly extolled the communists he had once reviled.
German-Russian relations have been finally settled. Any territorial differences between the two states are hereby excluded for all eternity.
With Soviet Russia lodged within the Axis camp, Adolf Hitler felt his path was clear to wage total war against vanquished Poland's powerful allies, France and England. To reassure Europe's frightened neutrals, Adolf Hitler vowed that from now on, Nazi Germany would respect the sanctity of their frontiers.
It is our sacred will. We have no interest in breaking the peace. We want nothing of these people.
15 nations, which to their destruction had listened to the solemn pledges of the Nazi Führer.
We have assured all...
By the bravest hour of all British history, Dunkirk, and the world waited for the long-promised invasion of an England that was pitifully unprepared. But Hitler... And finally, again within the short space of weeks, his armies marched across New York in the summer of 1941. In the most spectacular betrayal of his career, Adolf Hitler struck with full force against his late partner, Joseph Stalin, and the Red Army of Russia. Then in 1940, the Russians had turned the tide of battle at Stalingrad. In North Africa 44, the Red Army was driving the enemy in full flight back toward its own borders. Then came D-Day, and the full combined might of the United States and Britain was brought to bear against Germany's continental fortress. Outnumbered, outfought, the Nazi dream of world domination had come to its shattered end, and the nation which had been so merciless in victory cowered in defeat. In May of 1945, the new order, which was to have lasted for 1,000 years, vanished from living history. To govern post-war Germany, an Allied Control Commission was created, made up of representatives of Russia, Britain, France, and the U.S. Each of these nations had been assigned an occupation zone of the defeated country, to be held until Germany should prove itself capable of responsible self-government. Each zone is administered in accordance with the national policies of the occupying nation. The Army rules this zone in a way to leave no doubt as to who lost the war. Its policy is to get as much out of the occupied territory as possible by way of reparations. The inhabitants of the Russian zone are cut off from contact with the democratic world of Western Europe, for Russia hopes to reorient the future Germany to a closer cooperation, both political and economic, with the Soviet Union. The British, in addition to Hamburg and other major seaports. The aim of Britain's military government is to restore this zone to productivity, for upon its industrial output depends the economic stability not only of Germany, but of all surrounding Europe as well. In this zone, strict rule prevails, for the French assume that all Germans bear a share of war guilt. More than any other nation, France has reason to fear her warlike neighbor, and her main purpose is to keep Germany forever incapable of further aggression.
in the American U.S. government has been to prepare the Germans to resume their existence as a nation while making sure that this would not leave them capable of again waging war. But to remake Germany into a self-supporting nation calls for a huge job of rehabilitation on the part of all four occupying powers. Basic task is to restore production in the Ruhr district, the most highly concentrated industrial center in the world. Though the great Krupp munitions works at Essen were destroyed, 75% of the Ruhr plants survived the war. Today, many industries are operating under British supervision, but their output is far below what it was. For iron and steel production, transport and power, all depend upon coal, and Britain has been unable to build up the production of the Ruhr coal mines to meet requirements. The low rate of production is basically a labor problem. The mines are manned chiefly by the young and unskilled or the old and tired. Most of the others were killed or taken prisoners in the war. The amount the miners can produce is cut down by undernourishment. Though Britain has allotted German miners increased rations out of its own meager food supply, hunger still produces widespread inefficiency and absenteeism. Just as urgent is the problem of rebuilding Germany's once highly efficient transportation system, which not only serves Germany, but is also an integral part of the network of railways which ties all of Europe together. Though much progress has been made in restoring trackage destroyed during the war, there is still great need for locomotives and passenger and freight cars. Though Germany's automotive industry has started up again, its output is strictly limited, as is that of all heavy industries, by shortages of coal and steel from the Ruhr district. Less handicapped by these shortages are the light industries, which depend upon handwork and craftsmanship. Today, German artisans are turning out great quantities of the kind of consumer goods for which their country has long been famous. Much of Germany's slowly reviving industry is being concentrated on producing for export. For only by building up its export trade on a big scale can Germany get off relief and contribute its share to the European economy, which has always been heavily dependent on it. Along with industry, the Allied governments have sought to revive food production. But with a large part of Germany's farming land in Russian hands, Western Germany still has to depend for half of what little it gets to eat upon imports. By far the greater part of these shipments, almost 3 million tons in the first 2 years alone, have come from the United States, one of the few countries in the world which, in the years directly after the war, produced great food surpluses. But not even this was enough to raise the German diet above the level of slow starvation, and more has had to be poured in. Despite the burden it entails, the United States, at least, is resolved to continue its occupation until the Germans prove themselves a reformed people. But of adult Germans deeply infected by Nazism, little can be expected. Any hope that Germany may ever become a responsible, peace-loving nation centers in the very young, who have not been corrupted by Hitler's doctrines of treachery and aggression, who may still be taught that Germany can find greatness only through freedom and democracy, in peaceful cooperation with the rest of mankind.